This is how we ride. This is how we do.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. And after experiencing the Kyle Larson High Limit Series last night, there's a lot of things to actually talk about. The cream did rise to the top. World of Outlaw drivers Giovanni Scelzi and Carson Macedo, 1-2. You had Tyler Courtney in there, and then 4 with Gravel, World of Outlaw driver. You had Larson in there at 5th, which technically in High Limit Sprint Car Series point standings, as they run right now, you have Tyler Courtney as the points leader, Kyle Larson 2nd in the points, because all the other drivers there are World of Outlaw drivers. 3rd in High Limit point standings would be Brian Brown. 4th, Anthony Macri. 5th, Corey Eliason. Now, if you look on the side here, it shows it a little bit differently, but this is based on finishing points. Obviously, we have a pretty good understanding that most of these World of Outlaw drivers are not going to run the entire High Limit schedule. I mean, we got another race coming up here in just 2 more weeks at 34 Raceway. Not sure if we'll have the quality of cars that we had here, because this was the Superstars of Sprint Car Racing event. This did have a Knoxville Nationals Kings Royal feel, because you had every star of the sport there, not just World of Outlaw guys, but the hitters of all regions and areas were on hand. And that is very special, and I think they'll have that about 4 times this year, maybe only 2 times this year, because obviously the Eldora Million is not a high limit event. With these guys having to burn 2 of those 4 nights at the Eldora Million, that's only leaving 2 other dates that they can run outside of the World of Outlaws Sprint Car Series, and I would assume it's going to be for the $50,000 events that we saw here at Lakeside and then Lernerville later in the season. Some people are confused what's going to count, what will, what won't. To me, guys, I think it's pretty simple. If it's broadcasted by Dirt Vision, it's not going to count. If it's broadcasted by Flow, it is. Something that did kind of overshadow the event, though, and has somewhat spurred discussion, is the wreck with Jake Neuman. Obviously, for those who didn't see it, here's just a little clip. I don't want to show it over and over. Luckily, the guy's not dead. I did not show any clips of Justin Owen's wreck. Because he died. He passed away. But I think if a driver survives, that it's okay to look and analyze. And even if a driver dies, it's okay for some people to look and analyze, but not everybody. I've seen a lot of people make comments about safer barriers and stuff. And after these 2 wrecks, we need to look into safer barriers. And to me, that's just stupid. To me, the thing that needs to be addressed in sprint car racing is innovation. You know, I've been able, at least luckily, I'm going to say luckily, to be able to drive a sprint car, to be able to drive modifieds, big block modifieds, micros, and the most uncomfortable, no room, piece of junk scenario situation I've ever experienced is when I strapped into that damn sprint car. Now, I'm a little bit bigger of a guy, okay. But, ladies and gentlemen, up until a couple, 10, 15 years ago, everybody's knees was sitting on a damn steering box. And they've developed these knee guards because people would flip and bust their damn kneecaps onto these things. You know, you put these halo bars on top because of how close your helmet is to the top of the cage. You've put these bars down the side here and there to keep you a little bit more contained. And I just think at this point, we need to recognize that the sprint car of today, that hasn't changed really at all as far as dimensions, is archaic. There needs to be a new standard, a new generational sprint car, at least in the driver compartment. What is truly going to hurt? You know, I hot lapped a sprint car, and then I went and raced a big block style modified, and the very big similarity between the big block modified and the sprint car is the uprightness of the car. You sit upright in a big block, but you actually have room for your legs in a big block, just a little bit more room. The cage is a little bitty bit wider, so you have a little bit more elbow room, more space between you and the edges of the cage. And honestly, out of all the cars I drove, IMCA modified, sprint car, big block modified, all this stuff, out of all the cars I drove, the big block modified was probably the most comfortable car there is. Because it had the sprint car style brake and pedal system. You were kind of upright, which upright is kind of good for high impact wrecks or slams here, slams there. An upright position is somewhat safer than laying down. I mean, Donnie Schatz literally said his most hardest wreck of his career was at Knoxville in a truck. I think the upright seating position in a sprint car chassis is fine. You could add 2 to 4 to even, 5, 6 inches on all ends of the driver compartment side and still have something that is relatively similar, or it keeps the tradition of a sprint car, but also is elevated to where you can have a little bit safer of a race machine. Now, some of the traditionalists, oh, who cares? Let's go and die. That's the greatness. And yes, I mean, there is admiration in the life-threatening scenario of a guy in these race cars. But it is not going to be solved with safer barriers. That's not problem number one in this form of motorsport right now. Problem number one in this form of motorsport is the average size of a driver has to be between 5'6" and 5'10" and 115 pounds to comfortably fit into the race car and not feel like their life is threatened. And I think the driver compartment situation is why sprint car drivers are relegated to that type of size for a typical driver. A jockey style size, literally a horse racing jockey style frame. So that's what I would say. If we want this damn sport to get a little bit more safer, we have to recognize that this sprint car chassis layout is archaic in itself. And we need to make a new car. And I understand that some people are going to say, well, if the performance of the new kind of car with the width and all that goes away, then I just think that fans and drivers and people won't accept it. Well, then, okay. Let the people who want to see, ambulances at tracks and people dying all the time, let them go off and be somewhere. Because maybe those are the type of fans that we don't need in the sport anymore. Those are the type of people who are archaic in their own fucking right. So let them stay in the past with this damn sprint car chassis that ain't changed in 30 to 40 fucking years. Now, I get it. There's been some changes, but the size, the dimensions, you go look at some of these sprint cars in the museums, there's not much of a difference from back then to now. Some people think that's great. I see that as a problem. And if you want to fix people not getting hurt or killed, you got to change that problem first, not safer barriers. A next-gen sprint car needs to be developed. And it needs to probably be stamped by the World of Outlaws, and they would have to mandate it and all that. And it would take, 2 to 5 years to weed out the old cars. And there'll probably still be some races that accept the old cars and stuff like that. You may have to add weight here or add weight there to even out the performance basis. And obviously, with the top-heavy dominant sport in the sprint car industry, the financial structure, where you have the Tony Stewarts, the KKRs, only about 5 to 10 organizations running the sprint car scene nationally. You could get 5 to 10 sprint car organizations to agree and get on board with this idea. And maybe the World of Outlaws is now you're a next-gen sprint car. And if you want to race with them, you got to have one. And the old traditional sprint cars, hey, maybe that could be All-Stars if they want to be archaic. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, be sure to subscribe.
This is how we ride. This is how we do.